So, what is going on here in the first reading from John Locke's second treatise of government? Well, let's take a look at it. Chapter 1, an essay concerning the true original extent and end of civil government, the origin, the original, the origin and extent of civil government. Where does the state come from? So, right away, we can see that we're in similar territory to Hobbes. We're asking about the origin of civil authority, the origin of government, the origin of the state. So how does he begin this, though? He's referring to the first treatise of government, which no one ever reads. Certainly I've never read it, but probably should. But he summarizes the results of what he's written already. It having been shown in the foregoing discourse that Adam, and that's the biblical Adam, right, the first man Adam, had not, either by natural right of fatherhood or by positive donation from God, any such authority over his children or dominion over the world as is pretended, that if he had, his heirs yet had no right to it. What is he talking about? Well, he's summarizing the results of something he's already argued, but the gist of it, I think, is that there's no divine right of kings. There's no divine origin of political authority. It does not come from God. That is, the whole thing about Adam is sort of, I suppose, a way of referring to that. That is, that political authority or, the legitimate government or state, the right to rule, Locke has argued it makes no sense to say that it comes from God, because then it just all breaks down. To say that somehow the king rules by divine right because his family was chosen by God and he's descended from Adam, who originally got the authority. So he says that doesn't make any sense. And that's really the setup here is, well, what does make sense? Where does legitimate government come from? And it's legitimate government that he's looking to find the origin of, right? Rightful government. That's why he says here towards the bottom, all these premises having, as I think, been clearly made out, it is impossible that the rulers now on earth should make any benefit or derive any the least shadow of authority from that which is held to be the fountain of all power, Adam's private dominion and paternal jurisdiction. Okay, so forget about that. Forget about a religious, biblical, theological basis for government. It doesn't work, he's saying. So where are we left? Well, then he says, so that he that will not give just occasion to think all government in the world is the product only of force and violence, and that men live together by no other rules but that of beasts, where the strongest carries it, and so lay a foundation for perpetual disorder and mischief, tumult, sedition, and rebellion, things that the followers of that hypothesis so loudly cry out against, must of necessity find out another rise of government, another origin of political power. So basically saying, well, I've proved to you beyond a shadow of a doubt that you can't derive the authority of government from God, from some notion of God assigning that authority to some human being like Adam or something like that. So where does it come from? That is, he's saying, if the whole divine right thing falls apart, then we have two choices. One is that there is no such thing as rightful government. There's just power, right? Which is what he's saying. He that will not give just occasion to think that all government in the world is the product only of force and violence. So one of the alternatives is to say, well, if God doesn't choose some human being and give them the authority to rule over others, maybe it's just all force and violence. Maybe there is no such thing as lawful government or legitimate government. But the other alternative is to find another origin, another, as he says, another rise of government, another way in which government actually emerges and is made legitimate. If there's a big difference between pure power, which is more or less what Machiavelli was working in, that space where the prince seizes power and keeps it, but there's no hint in the prince that the prince deserves power or is somehow legitimate or lawful authority. He just gets power and tries to keep it. Whereas Locke is talking about legitimate government, government that is sanctioned, lawful authority, not just violence, not just being the stronger. So he's looking for the origin of that, and that's because he's already dismissed one possible origin for that, and that is divine authority. And there are governments existing that that constitutionally, I believe, lay out that the authority of the rulers comes from God. I mean, I think a country like Iran, for instance, is the Islamic Republic of Iran. I mean, and I'm not making fun of it. It's just that they believe that ultimately power comes from God. Uh, Political power, political legitimacy, political authority. And certainly during the European monarchies, the idea that the king or queen or emperor or Kaiser or whatever it was chosen by God. The Tsar in Russia, for instance, that was the idea that divine authority came from above, or authority came from a divine source from above. So the whole point of this, as he says in the beginning, is to find out the origin and the extent of civil government. That is, where does civil government come from, and how far does it extend? Like, how far does its power actually extend?